There are three things I really would like to highlight in what was said. We're talking about a broader question because the Treaty of Lisbon came in we're on the basis of this concept of a social market economy. How do we dose things correctly between this social market economy and the desire to supervise and make sure that there is a certain amount of fairness? And this is important, I think, which perhaps hasn't been emphasized sufficiently. We're talking about agriculture, and this is a very strategic sector for the European Union. If you take a look at globally what is happening, the question of buying of land, you mentioned the food questions, Madam, all of this is part of our tradition, and that perhaps should be the heading, trying to keep a social market, but in a global situation with probably a lot more competition in agriculture. Secondly, there's another question which is far broader than that of agriculture, and that is risk and how we deal with these risks. Look at the volcano. It's nothing to do with farming, but what is the risk acceptance level in society? We're in a society where we like to think that we like free enterprise and risk and so on, but however, we are very keen on the principle of precaution and being careful and so on. And this is just as true for this sector. I very much appreciated the efforts that all three keynote speakers made to try and list categories of risks. I am a rapporteur for systemic risk, so I tend to see systemic risk everywhere, but on financial markets and in agriculture and a lot of other areas as well. I think we have to have categories and perhaps have different solutions depending on whether or not we're dealing with a regular situation or an exceptional case. And we also are concerned about our public assets, and I was fortunate enough to work with Romano Prodi in the European Commission. Pascal Lamy, I remember in 2004, tried to launch reflections on what we call public goods, public assets, and it was absolutely taboo to talk about this, whether it was agriculture or WTO or whatever. So I think if we're talking about the public domain with public assets that must be preserved, appreciation of risk, assessment of risk can evolve. Finally, a comment on the markets. I thought it was interesting that Mrs. Grossi and I think also Jesus talked about the derivatives market, the futures market. And what I want to say here is that there's a lot of work that we have to do yet, not just in the field of farming and agriculture, but it's interesting to see how the markets worked throughout this financial crisis and see what is lacking and what is lacking in Europe to have useful coverage for our real economies, of course, with the needs for liquidity on those markets, because there has to be an exchange, and the question of a speculation, I don't know where that begins, but we have to avoid fast trading operations as well, because at the end of the day, they are distorting useful tools and using them for something that has nothing to do with the real economy. So I would tend to say that we should try and be innovative in our proposals, but not naive. This crisis that has brought the Eurozone to the edge of the precipice is something that also had a lot to do with the way in which the markets function. And I think we have to think about the farmers and their incomes here and protect that. As you said, and I will wind up here, rural development efforts, all of this is very interesting, and we have to learn our lessons from what has been done, because there are so many different functions in agriculture. I come from the west of France, for example. On the ground, I've seen very diverse forms of farming, from organic farms to multinationals. And here again, I think with this differentiation and diversification, different types of support, we can adapt to this diversity, and this was the subject of our panel, a fairer distribution of public support. So we have to take this diversity into account, but that is the wealth of our European farming sector.